On today's show, after cities like Denver banned anyone from sleeping outside with their belongings, some homeless people might have thought about heading further west. Well, if you're homeless, one California city may not be an option anymore. An elected official is attacking senior citizens who are part of the 99% and even using nasty language to make his political point. And diversity in the media has come a long way in recent decades, but are people of color truly represented in the media industry? We have the answers coming up. I'm Jared Jakang Mayer. Each week we bring you stories from the front lines of the Occupy Wall Street movement and give the microphone to you, the 99%. You're watching Occupy the Media. Thanks for tuning in to Occupy the Media. This show is an effort by Free Speech TV to stay on top of the latest news coming out of the Occupy Wall Street movement. We want to cover the stories and perspectives you won't see on corporate media, and we want to do this by giving the mic to you, the 99%. Our big topic today, urban camping bans. Several cities have now made it criminal offenses to sleep outside on public or private property with anything protecting you from the elements, even cardboard boxes or blankets. These laws are meant to target the homeless and occupiers. Is this a violation of human rights, or are such bans necessary? You tell us. Join the conversation. Call us toll-free at 877-575-FSTV. All right, it's time for headlines. Let's get started. Ben & Jerry's co-founder Ben Cohen wants to help Occupy Wall Street spread its message through a new medium, U.S. currency. Cohen is leading a campaign to encourage occupiers to stamp dollar bills with slogans like "corporations are not people," "money is not free speech," and "not to be used for bribing politicians." Cohen, who sides against the 1%, hopes the effort will stamp out corporate money in U.S. politics. A recent meeting of Chevron shareholders in San Ramon, California, were picketed by about 100 activists representing an international coalition of environmentalists. Residents from Ecuador, Brazil, and Nigeria teamed up with supporters of the Occupy movement to protest the oil giant's damage to the environment. Chevron faces $43 billion in fines because of contamination, explosions, and tax dodging in several countries. Also in California, about 30 minority students and some non-minority supporters took over the UCLA admissions office. Their message, double the enrollment of Black, Latino, and American Indian students. The occupiers said the university's student body needs to better reflect the racial demographics of Los Angeles. Occupy Fresno in California is settling its lawsuit against Fresno County. Occupiers were suing the government for violating their free speech rights, but thanks to the settlement, protesters will be able to freely circulate flyers, carry signs, and hold small gatherings in Courthouse Park. Criminal charges were also dropped against occupiers who were arrested. Fresno's occupation has gained recognition for its continuous 24-hour presence in its original location, Fresno County Courthouse Park. And a judge has agreed to let a lawsuit by Occupy Wall Street activists go forward. The case stems from the arrest of more than 700 protesters on the Brooklyn Bridge last October. Here's Caroline Briggs with more.
The First Amendment held at least some of its ground against the chilling actions of the police state last week. Occupy Wall Street was on course to sue New York Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly and Mayor Michael Bloomberg for infringing on their rights to peacefully protest. However, a U.S. district judge ruled out the possibility to sue the mayor and commissioner, citing that Occupy could only pursue the lawsuit with the city itself. Activists say this is a big win for constitutional rights and the power of demonstration. The lawsuit came after the arrest of more than 700 protesters on the Brooklyn Bridge last October. Occupiers used video evidence to show that police did not properly warn the group before executing the largest number of arrests in the movement to date. For Occupy the Media, this is Caroline
That's it for our top Occupy headlines, but we have many more stories to dig into today. Sitting here in our studio is Marcy Miranda, Free Speech TV's news producer, and Don Rojas, FSTV Executive Director. Don, we missed you last week. Good to have you back.
Great to be back, and this is our 13th show. Congratulations,
Is this our 13th
guys.
show?
Lucky 13.
I thought it was unlucky 13.
Yeah.
No,
we'll
for
see.
us.
We'll see how it goes. But let's talk about this story, about this lawsuit going forward in New York City. Marcy, this was goes back to the big Brooklyn Bridge arrests we saw last year, where 700 people were arrested. Really galvanized. One of the things that galvanized the Occupy Wall Street movement. Now it's going into the courts, and this judge made a decision today, which was kind of a mixed bag. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, basically the judge, Occupy Wall Street had gone forward with the suit saying that the orders were coming from the top down, that they had to make these massive arrests, and the judge, so the occupiers named Mayor Michael Bloomberg, Raymond Kelly, and the city of New York as defendants. The judge said that part of the lawsuit has to be tossed out. So now the lawsuit can continue, but only name individual officers as defendants.
So rather than being able to name people like Michael Bloomberg and actually make a legal point that this is actually a coordinated policy effort within NYPD to do these types of pre-arrests, now they'll only be able to focus on specific officers. Don, what do you make of that?
I don't think that's fair at all. First of all, let me say this. This is a victory for the Occupy Wall Street movement in New York, a victory for constitutional rights, a victory for the right to demonstrate. But Mayor Bloomberg is clearly a member of the 1%, and probably so is Ray Kelly. And the axe is going to fall on rank and file officers. I mean, lower level guys who were obviously acting under orders from their superiors. The superiors get off scot-free, but they themselves, who are members of the 99%, the majority of the NYPD, they're the ones who are going to face the consequences.
I mean, the one bright spot I can see for the actual plaintiffs, the Occupy Wall Street people who are suing the city, is that even as they bring in individual officers to testify, we're going to get information about where those orders came from. There will probably be a lot of, hopefully, documents that get uncovered through discovery and maybe lift the veil on how these types of arrests are undertaken in the NYPD. But Marcy, what can we look forward to on this particular case? Is this one of the ones that's going to be focused on by the Occupy movement?
I think certainly so. Like you said, these arrests galvanized the movement, really brought it to the forefront of the mainstream media national attention. So I think there's going to be a lot of eyes on it.
Okay, well,
Yes.
we're going to be taking some calls later on in this segment, but let's stick around in New York and talk about how last week supporters of groups like Occupy the SEC and Alternative Banking called for the investigation of Jamie Dimon. He's the chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase, and this is in light of JP Morgan's recent $2 billion trading loss, or $2 billion, somewhere around there. The billions keep...
$2 billion is a conservative number.
Yeah, as much as $5 billion,
five or
I've heard.
more.
But what's a billion or two for JP Morgan? But now that we have Jamie Dimon testifying before a congressional committee today,
Right.
They
Senate
want to know
Banking
what
Committee
happened
today.
to this. But now Occupy SEC held this protest, and they want to hold Dimon accountable for a different reason. What do they want?
Yeah, basically they went out and did this. They protested from Liberty Plaza or Zuccotti Park, ended up at the SEC, and they were saying we need to draw attention to the fact that under this Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was passed after Enron, we should be prosecuting Jamie Dimon because as CEO, he had to know the risky trading that was going on, and he needs to be held accountable.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you spoke with Nathan Tankus, a member of Occupy the SEC, so let's watch that.
Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us more about who was at this march last week. How many people from Occupy the SEC were there, and what was the police presence like?
Well, we had 4 or 5 members from Occupy the SEC and some other people from Occupy Wall Street working groups. And we had about 20 to 30 cops there guiding us along, as well as private cops from each of the different professional buildings that would come out and stare at us.
Now, talk a little bit about why Occupy the SEC felt the need to gather this march and what you're trying to do under this Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Occupy the SEC and other people think that there's a case to be made for prosecuting Jamie Dimon under this act. What is this act, and why do you think that is the case?
Well, the key provisions in Sarbanes-Oxley, which was passed after Enron, is provisions that make the CFO and the CEO, that's Jamie Dimon, certify that their risk controls are adequate. And obviously their risk controls were not adequate. Both federal regulators and Jamie Dimon himself have come out saying that they're inadequate. And it comes with civil penalties, and if it's fraudulence is found, it comes with criminal penalties, including jail time.
Now, talk a little bit about how Jamie Dimon's been in the news and what Occupy the SEC has been doing to really push this.
Well, after the protest, there's also been the Senate banking hearing that's today, and we submitted questions to that through some of the congressional staffers that we know, basically pushing him and trying to box him into a corner to admit that his certifications were false.
Okay, well, Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Okay, that was Nathan Tankus, a member of Occupy the SEC, talking with Marcy about why they think that Jamie Dimon should be held prosecuted, criminally accountable under this Sarbanes-Oxley Act. But whether or not Jamie Dimon in this particular case should be criminally prosecuted, it is notable, Don, how no one from Wall Street, whether they're from the banks or some of these other big financial institutions who were responsible for the 2008 crash and dealing in these types of trading scandals.
None of them
have been prosecuted.
None of them have gone to jail. And in the case of Dimon, I would say that here is a guy who's so arrogant in his own personality. Went to the banking committee this morning and while continuing to admit that yes, they made some mistakes, but refusing steadfastly to agree to any further regulations from the Fed. I mean, if you don't regulate, J.P. Morgan and other major investment banks will continue to make these kinds of mistakes. Will continue with its casino banking practices.
But a lot of people point to this J.P. Morgan loss, this huge loss, but not one that is threatening the actual structure of J.P. Morgan, because even those billions of dollars represent a small part of its portfolio. But they will say this is a case where the market will correct itself. This loss by J.P. Morgan is enough of we don't need regulation because it's scared the pants off of so many of these large banks. If they're gonna regulate themselves.
Well, the market is not going to regulate itself. That's why you have these too big to fail financial institutions, because the market does not regulate them. It is a role of the federal government to do those regulations.
Well, it is interesting with Occupy the SEC, because the SEC has actually been very aggressive in taking on insider trading, but not going after these types of this type of banking regulation. But Marcy, what does Occupy the SEC want to do? Are they trying to bring focus and attention to something else that's different from all the other things we're hearing about J.P. Morgan and Jamie Dimon?
Well, I think, the important part for them is kind of what Don was saying. The banks, too big to fail banks, no one's been prosecuted before, so they continue doing the same kind of risky trading, playing with people's money and people's livelihoods because they think they can get away with it. And Occupy the SEC and other Occupy groups say this is enough. We have a clear case here where we can make an example out of Jamie Dimon, and we owe it to ourselves and to the 99% to do that.
Exactly.
And Don, where do you see this going? I mean, this is something that the whole focus on Wall Street and these types of shenanigans at the top of within these financial institutions was the original focus of Occupy Wall Street. It's kind of branched off, as we clearly can tell from the programming here. But is this something that you think that Occupy Wall Street should maintain a stricter focus on?
No question about it. And Occupy Wall Street, and I would say the President of the United States himself, and his Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner should in fact put pressure on Jamie Dimon. First to resign from his position on the New York Fed board, which, by the way, is a direct conflict of interest. He's sitting on the board that's supposed to be regulating his industry. And I would say that Attorney General Schneiderman should begin an investigation into the loss of this $5 billion. They're potentially a criminal prosecution in this case.
Well, I'd like to hear from our viewers. What do they think about this, about Jamie Dimon's comments before Congress today, and what should be done about it? But we're going to take a quick break right now. When we come back, the senator who called Social Security a, quote, milk cow with 310 million tits is back in the news again. But first, we want to hear from our Facebook friends. Do you think JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon should be prosecuted for the bank's $2 billion loss? Why or why not? Post your comments online at facebook.com/freespeechtv or on Twitter.
Hello, I'm Antoinette June, and this is your Occupy Update. Join the Occupy Atlanta Education and Training Committee for their weekly meeting on Friday, June 29th from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Share your thoughts on how Occupy Atlanta and the Occupy movement can be enhanced through education and training. For more information, please visit occupyatlanta.org.